Hello and welcome to another entry into my Dark Tower read-through 2017. Last time I checked in with you on that, I had finished Wizard and Glass, and I had taken a brief break, and then I was going to read Eyes of the Dragon, which I have now finished. Eyes of the Dragon was an earlier novel by Stephen King that actually continues along with The Stand in telling the story of Randall Flagg through the lens of other characters. What we get in Eyes of the Dragon is a fairy tale story written about two young princes in a medieval style world, which, as it turns out, is connected to Allworld, the world of the Gunslinger and the Dark Tower. Apparently, all the things that went down in Roland the Gunslinger's past, Flagg had attempted before. Because in Eyes of the Dragon, he's doing something very similar. He's essentially got himself appointed as the advisor to the king. And what he's trying to do is get the king to make some very bad decisions based on his advice that will then cause an insurrection of the people. Now, this is very similar to what he did to Roland's father many years later in the Dark Tower story. And it's interesting because even within the text of Eyes of the Dragon, Flagg winds up repeating himself. So apparently he has like 5 good ideas and he just keeps using them in various forms. Which, for somebody like Flagg, kind of makes sense. That's one of the things I really like about his character. This one is, it's a very fun read, because it is written in a fairy tale young adult style, and it's told from the perspective, primarily, of, it's a narrator's version of events, but it's told mainly about Peter and Thomas, the two young princes, who Flagg either manipulates or is straight up against. And it's really interesting the way everything plays out, because Flagg puts together this plot that is diabolical, especially considering who he puts the blame on. And, you know, it just goes to the deviousness of Flagg, because he reads people, he sees what people are like in their hearts. And for the most part, this works out for him really well. However, sometimes he comes across somebody, for example, Peter in Eyes of the Dragon, who is beyond his influence in any way. Peter is so good of heart and was so well educated by his mother that he's kind of immune to Flagg's tricks. So Flagg sees him as a threat and has to take him out. And that's a lot of what Eyes of the Dragon deals with. Later on, as we learn, they mention Dennis and Thomas by name in the Dark Tower books as somebody who has also been on an endless pursuit of Flagg / whoever he was at the time. The comparison is made between Dennis and Thomas and the Gunslinger, because when the Gunslinger is chasing Walter, if I'm remembering 100% correctly, it's when he's chasing Walter, and Walter remembers that, you know, he was pursued rather relentlessly before by Dennis and Thomas. But yeah, this is a really fun book, and as I did with The Stand, I've actually gone through and marked every major instance of Flagg that helps define his character a little more. And it's interesting, too, because they talk about how long he's actually been influencing the kingdom where the story takes place, and that, you know, he has done this for hundreds of years. Like, he first came, and he was essentially an executioner, under the name Bill Hitch, or Bill Hinch. Hitch? I think it's Hinch. Hinch. Yes. Maybe. He plays an executioner, he plays several, like, roles before he takes on Flagg, the court magician / advisor to the king. And he's done this through multiple royal families, changing his name every now and again. But most people, it says in the book that most of the older people know Flag's been around a long time because they remember him being at least fully grown adult when they were children. And now they're very old, and Flag is still there and still looks about the same. So a lot of people know that things aren't quite right with Flag, but they fear him, so it's kind of tough to do anything about it. Yet another entry, another great read. I love the way Stephen King builds a world, and the more I delve into everything else he's done aside from the Dark Tower books, because the Dark Tower books are great on their own. But having this expanded universe that I can delve into on the side is also great because you get so much more detail on some of these characters. Like Flag, this is just another great entry into what turns out to be a multi-faceted story that goes beyond the Dark Tower books explicitly. On that note, the next up is actually, I'm not going back into the world of the Dark Tower just yet, because the list I found online, the next in the reading order, was actually Salem's Lot, which I've never read. I don't know how I've never read Salem's Lot, but I never got to it. It is like 100% my kind of story, but for whatever reason, I've never read it, nor have I seen either the movie or miniseries that were adapted from the book. No idea why. Just, it never happened. And it's unfortunate that it never happened because I think I would have been much deeper invested in King's writing and King's world had I read Salem's Lot at an earlier date. Because before I really got in depth in the Dark Tower, I'd only kind of flirted with King and reading his works. Like, I'd read a book here or there. I'd read The Shining, I'd read Firestarter, a couple other little ones, but I'm now like fully in the world because of the Dark Tower books. And I want to get as much of it as I can. Every connecting factor I need. And I know that there's a character in Salem's Lot who comes into play in the Dark Tower books. But on the reading list that I found, Salem's Lot is the next up in the lineup. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. And then there's a few short stories that were recommended to read. So I'm going to take care of those. And I'm going to read the whole short story collection that they're in, mainly focusing on those stories as part of my Dark Tower read. And then I will finally get to Wind Through the Keyhole. So that is my plan for the time being. Again, Eyes of the Dragon, amazing book. Great on its own or as part of a wider King universe read, because you get all these little connecting factors that relate back to either the Dark Tower world or just stuff that Flag has done, in other King books. So that's going to be it for me today. As always, I hope you're all well, and I'll see you next week. This is our first hint because, wait, is it here?